Hey, welcome to the table. And for today, we're going to take a crack at D-Day at Iwo Jima. So I was able to punch all the pieces, which was quite brutal actually. The cardboard was I was very concerned I was going to rip my pieces, and I actually have a few damaged pieces because of it, but I hope your copy wasn't as stubborn as mine was. But this video is going to cover setup, and it's not quite going to cover all of setup. It's going to just get started with setup. So be sure to jump to video 2 if you want to just jump straight to the playthrough. And there is a small possibility it will be video 3. I can't promise you. This is a weird game. It's different than the other ones. So I actually can't predict how many videos it's going to take to get to the playthrough. But I do want to help with setup, and there's a lot to talk about. So let me get started. As usual, I like to go through all the components. And so first thing that's to talk about is you have your game board, which is very large, by the way. The Palelu, for example, on this same table, went about here. And so we have all this extra board that Palelu didn't have. That's the first thing. And the second thing, I'm not quite sure I'm happy about. In fact, I'm quite angry to learn this, and maybe it's on Board Game Geek, and I've been avoiding Board Game Geek, so I don't pay attention to everything everybody's been posting. And I'm hoping that the game rules are just different, and therefore I don't have to worry about it. But let me show you something, and you tell me if there's something that jumps out at you. Remember, this is a D-Day game. What's missing? If you guessed the fire intensity dots, you would win a chicken dinner. So for example, this blue here has no fire intensity dots around it. No steady fire, no intense fire. And per the rule book, I have to look at this sheet. So I now have like a player sheet. And look at this player sheet. See there? There's all the intense dots, the fire dots. So it's not actually on the game board anymore. So when I'm playing the game and moving my units around, I have to go look at this just to see where the fire zones are. I know I'm not acting angry, but it's because I'm on a video and I'm trying to be at my best behavior. But this makes me angry. I don't know why it's not on the game board. In fact, that's what was the most practically beautiful part. And I'm hoping that the gameplay maybe is fine and this won't be a big deal. But based on what I know from the previous games, this is a huge atrocity. I mean, I'm upset just from a video person perspective that I now have to move my camera here to show you what my unit's at, and then I have to move it here to show you the fire zones, and then move it back there, and then, I mean, just from a videotaping perspective, this is awful. But I think even from a game playing perspective, I don't want to hold a sheet in my hand and be looking back and forth. Okay, so that's the gripe. It's out of the way. Beyond that, the board does look beautiful. And looking at this sheet, if the board would have had these dots all over it, it would have still looked beautiful as far as I'm concerned. So there's some concerns already out of the chute that I may be very frustrated with this game just from this alone. But beyond that, it is definitely taking the game in a different direction based on my reading of the rules. And after my 4 playthroughs of Palelu, I'm very happy it's taking it in a different direction. So let's see where it takes us. So going back to the components, there's some artillery destroyed, smoke monsters. I'm thinking of the show Lost. Cave, and then there's this one token. It is a Japanese hero token. So make sure you catch that and get it in its own box. Then we have American disruption tokens and Japanese disruption tokens. Oh, I'm sorry, the Japanese ones are here. And then these ones, they say disrupted on, but they're actually garrison tokens, but I guess garrisons can be disrupted. And then there is a spot that's going to take you a ton of time. The divisions of the Marines they're either the 3rd Division, the 4th Division, or the 5th. And the way you can tell what they are is the 3rd Division has this little symbol on it. And I know I'm having a focus problem here. So this symbol has 3 arms. It's basically like a little pinwheel, right, that has 3 points to it. And that's the 3rd Division. 3 points, 3rd Division. This is the only way you're going to know it's the 3rd Division, is by looking at that pinwheel. Okay, so it's very important. The 4th Division is a little easier to see. It has the number 4 on it. And then the 5th Division, as long as you know your Roman numerals, you'll be fine. It's got a V for 5. Okay, so you're going to need to get all those units separated by 3, 4, and 5. That's your first task. Then your second task is amongst those, you have a holding display sheet. And you can see that the 3rd Division, the 4th Division, and the 5th Division has units that are ready to be deployed. Okay, this is quite helpful, in fact. The other thing about it is I still have a 3rd, 4th, and 5th Division tray, because that has the HQ units and all the other special units like engineering units that don't belong here. So you're going to have like a lot of components with that. The other thing that you need to do is make a cup. And in that cup are going to be these new components that have never been used before in a D-Day game. And they're called step loss counters. So let's go over this real quick. It's a pretty interesting concept. I'm curious to see how it plays out. But let's say I have this unit here. He's a 4-step unit. This is a full-strength infantry. So the very first time he takes a step loss, he takes damage. In the old days, we used to do this, right? We'd flip it over. And do you remember those bands? Those were always separate markers we had to keep off to the side. And anytime we went from 4 down to 2, we would go get the separate marker. But notice here that the 3 is missing. It goes straight from 4 to 2. That's where this comes in. So you have a step loss 1 marker for when he takes his first step loss. So now that is a 3. See how it has 3 pips on it? And so this goes with the unit. And so the unit now has, I don't know which way you'd want to do it, maybe this way on top. But what happens is the way you do is you combine them together. And so obviously a full-strength infantry unit has all of its weapons. Now, if you take your first step loss, this was a random draw. They're all different, by the way. So this is not the same as the other ones in the cup. So you get a random one of these, and this -2 means that he now has 6 strength instead of 8. His range is the same. And then you can see here, these are his 3 weapons. He has a bazooka, an MG, and demolitions. And so that would be his 3 pip. Now let's say he takes damage again, and he goes down to 2 pips. You toss this back in the cup, and you flip that over, and now you're down to 2 pips. And here you can see he has a Browning and a demolition, which is very interesting because Browning was not one of the 3 here, although technically the MG is a Browning. So anyways, you would throw this back in the cup, so toss it. But bear in mind, this also has 2 sides to it. And so when you're pulling them out of the cup, it doesn't matter if it's a step loss 1 or a step loss 3. You just pull a random one out of the cup. So let's say I throw this in the cup, and I'm going to go ahead and throw another one. And I'm at 2 steps, and now I take another hit. And I'm going to go down to 1 step. So then I grab this, and I don't use the step loss 1 side. I flip it over. And by the way, you can see this one's a little different. I flip it over, and now I have the step loss 3 side. And so it is now just an MG. That's the only thing he has. So it does get interesting because an MG is better than a Browning. And here he only had a Browning and a demolition, and now all of a sudden he has an MG. I guess thematically you can assume that they salvaged a weapon along the way or whatever. But the point being is this guy would now be only a 2 strength guy instead of a 4. And so this new step loss concept, it's a very big deal. And but as far as setup goes, it's just a matter of just put them all in a cup. So that part's, I really do like the fact that I don't have a separate step 2 counter versus a step 1 counter versus step 3. I really like that they just made them double-sided and you just grab it and use whichever side applies to you. That part was really cool. Now, you might be wondering what's the deal with the colored circle. And I think gameplay-wise, I haven't gotten to the part in the rules where it explains that yet. But the way you interpret it is you can see here that they called it red, but it looks brown or orange on the token. But red is company A, company B is white, and blue is company C, red, white, blue, America. So anyways, the 3 companies for each division is color-coded. And so I think it matters when you're counting your catastrophic losses, things like that. I'm not quite sure. I'm still trying to get to the bottom of that. I'm not done with the rules yet. I do know that when you take losses, you keep them separate. So the 5th, 4th, and 3rd Marines have their losses in separate boxes. So that's also very important. As far as other counters go, the fortification markers, just set them aside. You'll use those during setup. Here, there's some hero tokens. And if you've played previous D-Day games, these are actually very different. They actually have rifle and non-commissioned officer and things like that written on them. So I haven't gotten there yet, so don't ask, I don't know. There's also, these are just like tokens for determining what turn it is and things like that. And I just put them in their own box because these are like special things that we're gonna use as the game goes on. It is, there's some armor depth. Keep those separate. And then the actual depth markers, I think I've been able to, you could just put them all in one cup. I'm pretty sure you can do that. They don't have any actual designation things on them that we have to worry about. But here's where it gets crazy. So to set up this game, you have to first identify which of 6 scenarios you're going to play. Okay, so that's not a big deal. And the fact that there's 6 scenarios seems pretty neat, right? Well, before I get into that too deep, let me show you 2 more things. There is, normally this was on the game board in previous games. Remember, there was always a spot for you to place your cards and tell you what the turn sequence is. That's no longer on the game board. It's now just a sheet. So you just have a sheet you need to set next to the game board. And so when you're taking your turn, you start here and this is what you do as you go through your turn. The game board does not have that anywhere on it. All the previous D-Day games, this was on the board. I don't know what to think about that, to be honest. I guess I'm okay with it. Now what you get is another interesting one, and this is another tracker. This is the turn tracker, which used to also be on the game board. This one is where you're going to put your reinforcements, right? Just like you would any other D-Day game. And I apologize if you've not played any other one and this is your first one. I will try to keep a distinction between the two, and I can't promise you I'm not going to keep mentioning the previous ones because I've played them all so far, and this is my last one, and I do like to compare them, but anyways, my apologies if this is your first one. I will try to keep that in mind. Anyways, what you do is you would put your reinforcement marker, so on turn 6 maybe that's when the reinforcements arrive, right? Well, it's got some interesting elements to it. The first one is that the first 6 turns you can see are individual hours, or like they're 2 hours each, right? So February 19th all the way to turn 6 is still February 19th. But then after that, it's every turn is 1 day. And every day, every box is one day. Let me rephrase it that way. And then every day has 3 turns in it. So there's a mid, an evening. So there's actually, here, it says it right here. On game turn 7, each box on the turn track represents 3 game turns. The top number of each box is the morning game turn, and then place an unused marker in the AM turn box. So, and you can see there's a morning, a mid, and an evening. It's very crazy. So when you get to, like, for example, box 7, you're actually going to take 3 game turns before you move to box 10. And so, and it does keep track of the numbers. So this is game turn 10, game turn 13, etc. So it's a little different. Obviously, if this is your first D-Day game, it's not going to be different for you. You just got to understand it. And then the other thing that's interesting about this is we now have a lot of trackers. So you're going to have to put things on here to keep track of points, like how many step losses you've had. There's a way you could potentially lose if you lose a certain number of steps on just one given day. So you have to keep track of points for the US and for the Japanese. And so we'll get into that more as we start playing, but there's going to be a lot going on this little sideboard. And it's not a sideboard, it's just a sheet. But that's another thing you have to set up, and this used to also be on the game board. Okay, so then what about the 6 scenarios? The next weird thing, it's weird to me, I don't know, maybe it won't be to you, is scenario 1 is right here in setting up for play and page 8 of the rule book, right? So if you want to just dive in and play the introductory scenario, boom, you got what you need right here. It tells you there are 6 scenarios, and this is scenario 1, which I just explained. 2 is just Suribachi. 3 is the drive to the north, which is the Motoyama Plateau and Airfield 1. And then 4 is something called Hot Rocks, which is clearing the Motoyama Plateau. 5 is pushing them off the plateau and into the sea. And then 6 is like your grand campaign. It's basically your every spot you see on this map has to be taken. There cannot be a single Japanese position hex that belongs to them. You have to take it all, the entire island. That's what 6 is, which I think is pretty cool. So these scenarios, it does explain that, like, for example, I think Suribachi and the Drive to the North both start at the same game time on the track. So since they both start at the same time, you can, like, do them together. So you could do scenario 2 and scenario 3 together. They give you, like, all kinds of choices. It's actually quite overwhelming, to be honest. And here's another way to show how crazy it gets. Look at here on the turn track. See the little box? That shows that a scenario starts on the box. And then the stars show that the scenario ends on the star. Or I'm sorry, the triangle. The triangle is where the scenario ends. So you start on the box. So for example, scenario 1, which is the introductory scenario, is just the first day. So you would start on this box and you end on this triangle, which is turn 6. So you go from turn 1 to turn 6. Now these triangles in the boxes don't indicate which scenario is which, but you can see on here that there's a lot of boxes and triangles because that's what all the different scenarios cover, is different phases of the game turns. And of course scenario 6 would start at turn 1 and go all the way to 64 there, where you see the triangle. So that's the first thing you have to decide. Now, I obviously debated, do I have the gonads to try to do scenario 6 on my first go? I have no idea. Scenario 1, of course, is the introduction one, and every D-Day game I've played so far, the introductory scenario was always the kind where, you know what, you can play it and then just stop after the introductory scenario, or you can just keep going into the extended game, and And there's really no harm, no foul, right? You can always just see how it goes, and then if it's going great, you can just keep going into the extended game. Well, I can gladly tell you that scenario 6 is that same situation. The setup for scenario 6 is identical to the setup for scenario 1. It's just that you're going to keep playing after the end of the first day. That's the difference. There are some rule changes with scenario 6, so I guess you still have to make a decision. But for the most part, it's mostly the same. I think the difference is scenario 6 has maybe different conditions for how you can lose. So you have to be mindful of that. I'm not saying they're identical, but at least the start is identical. Everything else, though, not so identical. Now, I can tell you, like Hot Rocks is you're just taking specific spots of the map, whereas 6, you have to take the entire map. So you're going to do Suribachi, you're going to do Motoyama Plateau, you're going to drive them to the sea, you're going to do all those things with this. So that's just something to bear in mind. The next thing that we have to do, and this is what I was starting to explain, but then I realized, you know what, I need to explain this other stuff first, is it explains scenario 1 here and how to set it up. There you can see there's the US setup, and then there's a Japanese setup over here, and then they get into special rules and blah, blah, blah. You have to jump all the way to the end of the book. And I'm talking like the very end of the book to get into section 18 scenarios. And that's where you see the setup for all the other scenarios. So if you're sitting there scratching your head, like, where's the other scenarios? You got to go all the way to the back. And then you can see that, like, for example, there's drive to the north. You can see over here the Suribachi. And then I'm just putting the camera down so I can change the page here. And then your scenario 6 is in here somewhere. Right here, the campaign scenario, 18.7. So if you want to do the whole shebang, you're going to do 18.7. And you can see, like here, right here, look, US setup. Start with setup for scenario 1. There's no restrictions other than the reinforcement schedule. What's the Japanese setup? Start with scenario 1. What are the special rules? US units are automatically in command until GT7. So that's, we got it. So there's a few special rules for this. And then, of course, it has its own victory conditions. And basically, it has this phrase, which I find funny because I don't see this very often in English language. Not winning is losing. It's like a deep philosophical moment. But basically, they tell you what you need to do to win, and if you don't win, you lose. That's basically what they're saying. So I don't know. I get a chuckle out of that. But right here is your U.S. master reinforcement list. And here, what it's trying to tell you is on, for example, game turn 2, you need to have 3/27 R1 to R2. So what it's saying is that I think the 3rd division, the 27 units, they have this label on them. So if you go over here to 3rd, there should be a 27 right here. It's actually the 5th division, the 3rd battalion. You can see the 27 units right here. So the 3rd battalion of the 5th division. And by the way, that's what the blue is, right? The blue is the 3rd, red, white, blue. So 3rd division, 27th. Oh gosh, they tell you in the front of the book how to read those. I never remember. Okay, 5th Division, 3rd Battalion, 27th Regiment. That's how you read that. And then the I, K, and L are the company. So I Company, K Company, L Company. So it's the 5th Division, 3rd Battalion, and then that would be the 27th Regiment. And so what it's saying is you would put these on turn 2 of the turn track, and then they're going to land on R1 and R2, which is red 1 and red 2. beaches over here. So you can see that right here. Okay, so so they give you this chart, and there's a lot of sorting you gotta do, and then you can even see that for example, on GT30 it says 5 points in 3rd Division Artillery. I need to figure out what it means by points. I'm assuming that's where these record tracks come in. So you're actually going to put something on here and say you have 5 points of something. And I'm assuming it's like artillery points or something that you use to shoot artillery. Like I said, I haven't read the whole thing. I'm just trying to help you to piece together what you need to know to set this up. So if you're doing the full campaign, your master reinforcement list is all the way in the back on page 45. If you're just doing the first day, they give you a smaller list here to do. And then this is actually this is what's landing on the beach. And by the way, even if you're doing campaign 6, this is still the ones you set up to land on the beach. And then these are your reinforcements, right? So they're showing, and you can see it's still the 3rd Battalion, 27th Regiment. This should be identical to the first couple rows of the 6th scenario. It's just that this is only your first day, right? And in the if you're doing the 6th scenario, they're going to give you reinforcements for the entire, battle. So I don't know. Maybe you understood this 30 minutes ago, and I just belabored it way longer than I should have. But it's all very important. Especially when you're trying to separate your components and pieces, for you to separate those out like that. And it tells you when the setup says to place 1/28, you would place the HQ 128, the A, the B, and the C infantry companies. So you would do the whole 28th Regiment, including its HQ that goes with it. And then it has your landing beach codes. It explains it pretty well, but just trying to help. It's very different than previous D-Day games, and it actually reminds me a lot of Unconditional Surrender with the way it lays things out. Okay, so now is the mess. And you can see I'm dealing with a mess. I have a pile of chips here. These are all the Japanese infantry units. And you need to have them face up and viewing you. And so you got to look at each one individually. And so see how here it says HQ 109? I have to look. And there are sectors. Sector 1, Sector 2, Sector 3, Sector 4. And these are the setups for each one. And so I have to find where the 109th Division is. So I have to look and look and look. And maybe you found it and I haven't. It's like a Where's Waldo experiment. And where's the 109th? I'm not going to stop looking through the camera. I'm just going to look directly on the sheet. They're not in any numerical order. I'm sure they're in some kind of like historical order, but that like helps us worth a jack diddly. It's actually quite awful. To right here, HQ 109. See how it says HQ 109 there? So there's only one of them, and you can see here like the B309 was here. See that guy? And then see how it says the 5X below? That means there's 5 of them. So now I'm putting an HQ 109 over here. So I found 2 of, I have to find every one of these, and they are a part of Sector 3. They go in their own cup for Sector 3. I have a different cup for Sector 4, a different cup for Sector 2, and a different cup for Sector 1. And I got to go through every one of these and figure out which cup goes which. And they don't tell you. All it says on the token is that this is 312. And so you got to go look at this reference sheet and find 312, wherever the hell that it could be. And I have to say that this is very painful. It's not like it's difficult. It's just painful. Because I don't even know where 312 is. And I'm looking. I mean, I know it's elite, so see how it's dark red? So I'm skipping all the lighter red ones. And I'm looking for 312. I see 309. I see 311, but there's no 312. Or actually 312 was already found once before. So here we go. I got a second 312, and 312's on here somewhere, right here. It says there's only supposed to be one of them. And so why do I have two? God only knows. So I think that's because two 312s go down here. See? You put two 312s down here, and then one goes in the reserve pool for up there. So I'm going to put both of these down here in Sector 1. That's even more confusing, right? Because you got 312 in two different sectors. And here we go. 125. Looks like it's a... What are those? Those are... I think those are... anti-aircraft units. Interesting. Anyway, so it says 125, and here you go. There's a 125 right there. So they're saying only one is going there. So maybe that's the only one in the game. And then we have another anti-aircraft, 44 MC. And I guess you can see there's another one that goes in Sector 2. So you got to do this for the entire stack of stuff. And as you can see, I'm not going to record myself doing this. I will do this between videos, but that's where I'm at. It does give you a nice diagram of your starting landing beaches units, so you can just match up your American units on where you're going to be landing. And the last thing that I wanted to point out is there's a lot of notes on here. So for example, that's for if you're playing scenario 3, that's a modification to each of the sectors. Here, if you're playing scenario 4, there you're playing scenario 5. We are going to do scenario 1, and actually we're going to try to do scenario 6 because I'm a diehard that way. I like doing the big campaigns. We're going to try to do scenario 6, and maybe we'll fail miserably, but scenario 6, by the way, is you set up just like scenario 1, like I said. So we ignore all these white boxes. But if you're going to do one of these other scenarios, you got to read everything in these white boxes and do what they say. Now this one is important. This white box is telling you that if you have an F or an F, a Japanese fortification counter goes there. If you have two of them, then you have to put two fortification counters there. And I'll explain that in a second. And then here, you can see sometimes there's an asterisk. For example, this unit here has two asterisks next to it. And so just make sure you read that these units should be drawn randomly. See how it says that? And then there's a big explanation for one asterisk, and that's because this engineer has one asterisk. So every sector even has subnotes in it. And yes, you gotta read them. This is brutal setup compared to other games. Then the tanks have their own setup, so we gotta do that. There was one other thing. I'm definitely gonna show you what this is. Oh yeah, up here. So if you're doing scenario 3 setup, see how it has the black X? Scenario 1 and 2 setup is going to use the black X, which is 14 units. If you're doing the white X, that's scenario 3 setups, 14 units, including 4 units of the 145th regiment, or whatever the Japanese called it. So what the heck does that mean? I'm still going to show you the FF thing in a second. What you have to do is you got to look on the board and see they have these X's, and these X's mean that a unit starts here, but there's black X's, or there's a black background with a white X on it, and then there's a white background with a black X on it. So see how there's these two different X's? Well, you got to look at your scenario. If you're doing scenario 1 and 2, you use the black X, or the white X on the black background. If you're doing scenario 3, you got to use the white background with the black X. So it gets insane. You gotta pay attention to that. And then if you're doing scenario 4, it's these plus signs. And if you're using scenario 5, you're using these V signs. So crazy, cray. Now The good news is the campaign that I'm going to be doing with you guys, we're going to just pay attention to the white X on the black background. That's the only thing we have to pay attention to. And everything else we can ignore. But I did want you to at least be able to appreciate what it's taking to set this game up. I think it's going to take me 2 hours. I'm serious. I got to go through this entire stack. And you saw how long it took me to do 2. And this was just this. This doesn't count the time I spent reading the rule book to even understand what the hell I'm supposed to be doing. 2 hours. Hopefully with my video, I helped you to cut it down to 30 minutes. I'm hoping that you're down to 30. It might even be 40, depending on how quick you can sort these and how quick you can sort those. This, by the way, wasn't a trivial exercise either. That was a very big exercise to put all those out. So, very, very long time. Now, once I get these separated into their sectors and I have them in the separate cups, I'm going to baggie them separately and hopefully they'll never get mixed together again. But the thing is when these guys die, I'm going to have to go look over here just to figure out which cup I'm supposed to throw them in whenever they die, right? I don't know of an easy way. All I can say is if anybody who was responsible for making this game ever watches my video, I have 2 things to say. The first one is I want the damn fire zones on my map. That needs to stay there. The second one is find somewhere on here, anywhere, to tell me which sector this unit belongs to. And that's more important to me than these historical B/2E/2. I don't care what the historical marker was for this engineer unit. I want to know that this was sector 2 or sector 3 or whatever it is. So let's see, B2E2. Here's C2E2. Here's 1E145. B2E2 is sector 4. So there's nothing on here that tells me it's sector 4. That is painful. Very, very painful. I'm not saying that the game's not fun to play. It might be a blast to play. But in terms of setting this up, I'm groaning and I'm moaning and not very happy. But we're going to play it. And for how long I'm spending to set this up, we're doing scenario 6. I'm playing way more than 1 day of landings. I mean, to all this setup just to do 1 day of landings, you're crazy. I don't care if it's your first time. It's crazy. Anyways, enough of that whining. I am going to get back to it. I'm going to let you go. Stay awesome. And I'm going to get this taken care of and try to get it all set up for scenario 6. And it'll be a while before you see me upload my next video because I do have some rules I need to get through. This game is so very different. In some ways, I'm excited about that. In other ways, it's like, wow. So far, definitely some negative things to say. I hope that the gameplay isn't bad, because if the gameplay is good, all of this will be worth it. So far, I do have some negative points, and thank you for bearing with me, and we'll see you soon.